This is Part 2, Episode 63. Chen Wanyan and the rest received a huge blow, and Cai Yunxiang also couldn't accept it. Qin Mu felt that it was not because they were too stupid, but because Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was too clever. For an incomparable talent that appeared once every 500 years, he could understand any logic with just one explanation and one hint. He didn't even need others to guide him, and he could naturally comprehend numerous reasons. However, other people didn't have his heaven-defying comprehension. There was a huge gap even between the talents. Even though Chen Wanyan and the rest were talents of 1 in 10,000s with outstanding aptitudes, or outstanding comprehension, they were far inferior when compared to a monster that appears once every 500 years whose aptitudes and comprehension were the first in the world. Things that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor thought were simple actually needed them to calm down and comprehend. The difference in talent between Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and them was literally heaven and earth. Take Green Dragon Vital Chi as an example. Do you think Green Dragon Vital Chi is really the wood attribute? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor guided them patiently. Have you seen a real green dragon? I have, and the green dragon I saw could control the wind and lightning, fire and water, not just the wood attribute. Moreover, what's wood attribute? If you hug a plank and bite it twice, is that wood attribute? Don't assume Green Dragon Vital Chi has the wood attribute just because there's a green word in Green Dragon. If you assume that way, you really have a wooden head. Everyone was given another blow, and even Qin Mu felt a sense of setback. Even he who was learned had thought Green Dragon Vital Chi was the wood attribute, but thinking about it now, there was no trace of wood attribute when Old Ma executed Green Dragon Vital Chi. Instead, there was wind and lightning interweaving. Looked like there was indeed somewhat deviation from what he knew. Without Imperial Preceptor pointing it out, he would probably continue having the misconception. There are actually many techniques for 5 elements divine treasure that you can learn from. Some of them are specialized in opening the battle power of 5 elements divine treasure. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, the battle power of 5 elements realm is very astonishing, but it's also fine if you can't cultivate it. It won't affect you in breaking through other divine treasures. You will only be slightly weaker in the future. But this slight gap would gradually magnify as you grow, and the more divine treasure you open, the larger the gap will become. He drew 2 triangles in the sky. One had a smaller angle on the top, and the other had a bigger angle on the top. He then drew 6 horizontal lines in the triangle and said, each of the 7 lines in the picture represents the power of each realm. The second line is the 5 elements realm. If you don't cultivate properly, the second line would be a little shorter than others, then the third line would be much shorter. When you reach the bottom of the triangle, which is the divine bridge realm, at that time, you will be shorter than the others by a whole chunk, and the difference in power is literally halved. If the opponent wants to kill you, he just needs 1 or 2 moves. His example was very direct and shook them. 2 people who clearly didn't have much difference in spirit embryo realm and 5 elements realm actually had such a huge gap between them when they cultivated to divine bridge realm. There were not many people who actually thought about this point and only cared about raising their cultivation realm. Cai Yunxiang suddenly asked, what's Imperial Preceptor's line? Compared to the other cult masters of divine bridge realm, how big is your angle? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor drew a straight line in the sky and said indifferently, I'm this. No matter how strong other people's cultivation is, their angle will always be smaller than mine. He dared to say so because of his heaven-defying aptitudes and comprehension. He practically had no shortcomings. Other people were 7 parallel lines while his was 7 lines overlaying each other, which was much stronger than others. You can take reference from the techniques that are related to 5 elements divine treasure in Floor of Heavenly Record, such as Minutes of Suppressing Stars written by Elder Ru Shenqin, Struggle of the Five Phases written by Monk Yuan Kong, and also 5 Laws of Jupiter written by Duke Wei, 5 Vitals of Military Discipline by General of Heavenly Strategies. After reading all of them, you will build a strong foundation for your 5 elements realm. These people he had mentioned were the first-ranking high officials of the current imperial court. Elder Shenqin was a woman who held the appointment as the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince. Monk Yuan Kong held the appointment as Grand Marshal, and there was no need to mention about Duke Wei. General of Heavenly Strategies was the head of the reputable Qin family. These few people, that were either born from aristocratic families, or well-known, were all cult master-level existences that had reached the divine bridge realm. Everyone hurriedly memorized the names of the techniques down. Chen Wanyan felt a little contradictory. He had planned to enter 6 Directions realm directly after this experience, but after listening to Imperial Preceptor's words, he made up his mind to continue suppressing his realm. He would only break the 6 Directions wall after he returned to Imperial College and strengthened his foundation. Qin Mu was stunned. He suddenly thought of some techniques in great educational heavenly devil scriptures, which were specially used for cultivating 5 elements divine treasure. There was a wide array of techniques in great education heavenly devil scriptures, and most of the techniques didn't look too intricate and couldn't be considered top-notch techniques. These techniques were usually imparted to the disciples. Almost all the techniques and divine arts in great educational heavenly devil scriptures were imparted out and weren't kept away because of its value. However, there were some techniques that were difficult to understand and were easy to cultivate wrongly, therefore they carried the reputation as a devil cult. Qin Mu originally didn't further study these techniques, but after Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's pointers, he instantly came to realize, wasn't the techniques that seemed standalone in great educational heavenly devil scriptures the secret to cultivation? These techniques that seemed scattered and not powerful didn't only consist of the method to cultivate 5 elements realm. There were probably the techniques for 6 Directions realm, 7 Stars realm, and even Celestial Being, Life and Death, and Divine Bridge. These techniques were learned by each Hall Master of Heavenly Devil Cult before imparting down to the followers, and thus formed the 360 halls. Qin Mu had treated these techniques as weak, and didn't incorporate them into Unity Technique. Now the unintentional words from Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had instead pointed out a clear path to him. Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique has technique, but no skills. It has inadequacies. But it might just be a perfect combination if combining it with great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Qin Mu was filled with excitement and immediately comprehended the cultivation methods of 5 elements realm. These 5 methods were Saturn Sovereign's Earth Marquis True Technique, Jupiter Sovereign's Wood Marquis True Technique, Mercury Sovereign's Water Marquis True Technique, Mars Sovereign's Fire Marquis True Technique, and Venus Sovereign's Gold Marquis True Technique. Not long after, he started to try to merge these 5 true techniques into the 5 elements realms technique of Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique. Yu Qinghong and the rest were consulting sword skills from Imperial Preceptor, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor chatted as they walked, saying everything that he knew. However, before they could comprehend it, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had already moved to the next point, which vexed them. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's explanation wasn't considered fast. It was just hard for them to comprehend immediately, and had to spend the time to slowly comprehend it. However, they didn't dare to clarify it as they were afraid they would be once again crowned as the lousiest class. After Yu Qinghong had consulted him about sword skills, Monk Yun Qiu asked him about Buddhist skills. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also had attainments on Buddhist skills, and had entered Great Thunderclap Monastery before to consult Old Rulai. His speech naturally was like a deluge of heavenly flowers. After Yun Qiu had consulted him, Chen Wanyan asked him about the fusion of sword skills and battle techniques. After he cultivated with Chancellor Ba Shan for a period of time, Chancellor Ba Shan had imparted 7 ways of the hegemon to him and also gave him pointers on the cultivation of his sword skills. Thus Chen Wanyan had walked down the path of cultivating both knife and sword. Cai Yunxiang also consulted Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor some questions on cultivation, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor paid more attention to her, explaining in detail, and slightly more than others. When Cai Yunxiang followed the young patriarch to cultivate, she had met him a few times and got his pointers in the past. The wolf slave hesitated for a moment and puckered up his courage to consult knife skills from him. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took a look at him and asked, "Warrior of Wolf Store Country?" The wolf slave nodded his head in anxiousness. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was unconcerned and said, "Education is for everyone, irrespective of background. I don't care what race you are." After he had said that, he gave him pointers for his sword skills and didn't hide anything he knew, not stopping before he had said it through. Not long after, everyone fell silent as they were comprehending his words without a sound. Even though Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor didn't say much, it was enough for them to comprehend for a while. Imperial Preceptor, have you studied demon cultivation before? Hu Linga broke the silence as she asked him on Dragon Chilin's head. Eternal Peace shook his head, never did. Hu Linga's eyes lighted up and said with a crisp voice, "I can teach you." She looked very serious. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also asked seriously, "May I ask for your guidance?" Hu Linga told him about what she had learned through cultivation, and told him about the knowledge she had learned from the collection of books from Surging River Dragon Palace. She even told him about spirit creation technique, which was mixed with her own comprehension. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor listened silently, and when Hu Linga was finished, he suddenly asked, "The demon race has no divine treasure?" Hearing about what you have learned through cultivation, there was no cultivation related to divine treasure. Hu Linga shook her head and replied, "We don't, therefore we have to work hard to cultivate to a human form. Once we have a human form, we would be a demon king, which is very powerful. I've also seen a few demon kings before, and they indeed have unusual abilities." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, "The spirit techniques you mentioned earlier to change your form was very interesting. This technique seems to have countless changes." He explained spirit creation technique in detail, and Hu Linga became more and more enthralled. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was done, she then came back to her senses and cried out in astonishment, "I said just now that I wanted to teach you. How did it become you're teaching me?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, "We teach each other." En. Hu Linga nodded her head heavily. The dragon Chilin under her but snorted and rolled his eyes. At this moment, lights actually appeared in the sky which flew towards them. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took a look and his gaze landed on Qin Mu's body. Those lights gathered and entered Qin Mu's body from the top of his head. More and more lights appeared and gradually turned into a slender flow of light that had a fire-red color. Hu Linga gave a touch and a tuft of fur on her paw was burned. She immediately pulled back her paw. Not long after, Qin Mu's aura increased exponentially and flames poured out from his body, surrounding him like fire clouds. Hu Linga was still astonished when she heard 2 popping sounds as 2 bull horns grew out from his head. His nostrils started to gradually rise and pushed outwards, spewing out 2 trails of white smoke which carried flames. Hu Linga cried out in astonishment and heard 2 cracking sounds as the bones in Qin Mu's bone transformed bizarrely. His thighs became thicker and his body also grew taller. His muscles started bulging outwards and flame markings covered his entire body. A bullseye popped out on his forehead right, at the heart of his brows. Hu Linga then saw a bull's tail drooping down behind Qin Mu's buttocks, which had also become larger, looking like the large and firm buttocks of a bull. His tail whipped twice on the firm buttocks, which she reckoned was very painful. Imperial Preceptor. Hu Linga was stunned for a moment before turning her head to tell Imperial Preceptor, "My young master has revealed his true form." His true form? He's not a fox demon, he's a bull demon. This is not a demon, but a kind of god transformation, to transform into the shape of gods. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was used to this sight and explained to Hu Linga. He naturally could see that this wasn't Qin Mu revealing his true form, and was a peculiar technique instead. It seemed to be the effect by merging a few techniques of Heavenly Devil sect together. It seems to be spirit creation technique merging with the Mars technique of 5 elements realm. He had little knowledge about great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, so he wasn't too sure. Qin Mu's body shape shifting was considered god transformation, and some techniques could achieve that as well. It wasn't rare, and it was one type of body divine arts. The techniques of some sects specially relied on god transformation and devil transformation to upgrade their bodies. However, Qin Mu's god transformation made Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor puzzled. It didn't seem like it was just a body divine art. Body divine art was naturally used to upgrade one's body and relied on one's strong body to increase their battle ability. Whereas Qin Mu's god transformation seemed to be god transformation. In Imperial Preceptor's eyes, Qin Mu relied on his technique to turn himself into the appearance of Mars Sovereign. When his corporeal body changed, his vital qi also changed at the same time. Even the aura he was giving off has also changed. Which also means he obtained the body and the divine arts under the state of God transformation. Now this was very strange. The transformation on Qin Mu's body had yet stopped, and fire clouds churned under his feet, gradually turning into 2 fire dragons. The fire dragons became longer and larger, lifting his body from the ground. Qin Mu stepped on the fire dragons, and his feet ripped apart his shoes as they turned into 2 flaming hooves. The him now was like Mars Sovereign, who was stepping on 2 fire dragons. Qin Mu raised his hand and the surroundings instantly became incomparably dry, as fireballs that were the size of goose's egg flew around in the sky. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor gave off an interested expression as he looked at these fireballs that were neither too big nor too small. Suddenly, sword lights, which were formed by fine flames, burst forth from each and every one of the fireballs. Each sword light was executing sunset sword skill, and there was also the power of fire attribute spells in the sword skill at the same time, therefore the power of each sword wasn't weak at all. Sunset sword skill of Yuyuan Empire, very orthodox, which also has the marvel of sword pellets. Combining the power of the spells, your strength could basically be compared to a divine arts practitioner's. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor side, if you clash face to face with a divine arts practitioner of 6 directions realm, you won't die. If you can unleash the body divine art of God transformation, you can rival divine arts practitioners of 6 direction realm. Qin Mu's sword skill retracted and returned to the fireballs. The fireballs collided with one another, forming a red sun that was as huge as a basin. He then opened his mouth to swallow that red sun into his mouth, spewing 2 trails of flames from his bull's nose. He stopped executing Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, and the 2 bull's horns on his head gradually shrank. His body also slowly returned to normal and the 2 fire dragons under his feet slowly dispersed. Qin Mu touched his buttocks and gave off a puzzled expression. There was a searing pain on his buttocks, as if someone had whipped his a few times. Could it be that I'm used to herding cows ever since I was young, therefore I like to whip the buttocks of a cow? The cowherd boy from disabled elderly village thought suspiciously to himself. There was a mighty mountain in front, where the waterfall fell from the sky, which seemed like an upside-down Milky Way. The white color of the waterfall, the black color of the cliff, the greenery of the mountain peak, and the sun hanging over their heads formed an ink painting of the mountain and river. The sound of the water was deafening and there was dense water vapor traveling over. Fine mist was everywhere in the air, which landed on everyone's body, making their clothes slightly damp after a while. This place made people feel delighted and relaxed. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor brought them to the southern borders, and didn't take any official path. They determined the direction, and continued walking, which had now brought them to the mountains. The waterfall formed a deep pool, which was clear, and there was a buck with branching horn beside the pool, swaying its short tail, and eating the turf grass. There were white spots with the shape of plum blossom on its body. When it saw them walking over, the buck immediately raised its head, and sized them up while taking 2 steps forward. Everyone exclaimed handsome secretly. This buck was about the same size as the dragon Qin, looking very majestic. That buck puffed from its nostrils and came to the side of the pool. There was an elder in woven rush raincoat beside the pool, and he stabbed his fishing pole on the shore to fish. There was a child beside this elder, who was older than a kid, but younger than a teenager. He picked up stones in boredom and threw at where the elder's hook was. This child didn't just throw 1 or 2 pieces, instead, he kept throwing. This waterfall was so huge and the current was so urgent, even if there was fish, they wouldn't eat the bait. Plus the fact that this child was throwing rocks continuous into consideration, this elder didn't need to think of catching anything today. Yu Qinghong shook his head. This child is his own, otherwise he would have smacked him to death. Who can endure this? Qin Mu revealed a puzzled expression and looked around. This wasn't a fishing spot, and yet there was an elder fishing here. There was a child throwing rocks at the hook. No matter how he looked, this elder didn't seem to be here for fishing. In such wilderness where footprints were rare, they could only be blocking the way if they weren't fishing. In addition to this plum blossom buck that was no inferior to the dragon Qin, the identity of this elder was probably in existence on the same level as the young patriarch. Chen Wanyan and Cai Yunxiang also noticed something wrong, and looked towards Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Monk Yun Q didn't think so much and went up to inquire with a smile, "Elder, how could there be fish here? This must be your grandson, right? With your grandson throwing the rocks continuously, even if there's fish, they would have been spooked." The elder raised his head and revealed a face full of wrinkles while smiling. "How come there no fish? Didn't the fish just arrive?" Yun Q looked towards his hook and didn't see any fish. He only saw that brat still throwing rocks. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor came forward and said cynically, "Even though this pool isn't big, the fish isn't small and would be hard to catch. I wonder if Elder has the ability to." Wrinkles creased up on the elder's face as he smiled. This world was originally a pool of clear water. A big fish came to stir up this water. This huge fish should have jumped through the dragon's gate to become a true dragon, yet it not only stirred up the water, but also wanted to eat the small fishes, clearing them all. "Imperial Preceptor, you decide. Should I fish up this big fish or not?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's gaze flickered, and said at a speed that neither fast nor slow, "Isn't it a little inappropriate for Elder to compare sex to small fishes, am I right? Sex should be leeches that cling onto the bodies of fishes. Even though the water looks clear, the fishes in the water are all bitten by the leeches, and in that case, we shouldn't fish and instead, we should drug and get rid of the leeches." The elder did not speak another word. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor didn't speak as well. When words get sour, saying any more was useless. They had already said a few sentences, and felt that they couldn't convince each other, so it was useless if they continued talking. Since their ideals were different and they can't convince each other, it would be better to eradicate the other side and be much more straightforward and refreshing to just destroy the other side's ideal. That elder got up and pulled out his fishing rod and line. Placing the fishing rod vertically upwards beside a huge tree, he took down his straw hat and woven rush raincoat. He waved his hand to signal the brat beside him to move back, go to the mountainside. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said to Qin Mu and the rest, go past the mountain and wait for me there. Elder, have you passed down your abilities? That elder nodded, I've passed them down. What about Imperial Preceptor? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said indifferently, I have no need. I was too hot-headed in my early days and killed too many people, eradicating too many sects. This resulted in many unique skills of numerous sects being lost. This was something I often regret after setting up Floor of Heavenly Records, therefore from then on, I would always have the habit to ask this before I kill people. Even though Qin Mu wanted to stay and witness this battle that was rarely seen, the blast from the collision of existences, at the level of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, would probably be even more violent than Juqian Devil King. If he observed the battle from such a close distance, he was sure to die. Let us cross the mountain, Qin Mu said sternly. He brought everyone up to this high mountain and looked down. The two people below the waterfall had been covered up by the mist and couldn't be seen clearly. The brat throwing the rock was riding the huge buck and was not far away from them. He blinked his eyes innocently, you guys are from Imperial College. Chen Wanyan nodded his head and asked, how do I address brother? Muren, Wang Muren. His age was similar to Qin Mu, but he presented a different steadiness when compared to Qin Mu. This Wang Muren was extremely active and couldn't sit still. He would feel bored the moment he became silent. He couldn't stay still even when riding the huge buck, slapping the bucks, but to run over. Qin Mu asked, which sect is brother Wang from? Little Jade Capital. Little Jade Capital. Chen Wanyan, Yun Qiu and the rest were slightly at a loss. They had not heard about this sect before. There were 3 big sacred grounds in Eternal Peace Empire, and some large-scale sects that were not inferior to the 3 big sacred grounds, however, Little Jade Capital wasn't among them. Qin Mu was stunned. The 2 words, Jade Capital, weren't words anyone could use. Jade Capital referred to the capital city, where the Celestial Emperor lived, and this Celestial Emperor wasn't God, and was an immortal, the Celestial Emperor of Immortals. Which sect was so daring to take the name, Little Jade Capital? There are very little people living in the sacred ground of our Little Jade Capital. They were all mainly old men and old women. There aren't many that are of the same age as me. Wang Muren said, this time there was someone who came to visit and found my master. He asked my master to pay a visit to Imperial Preceptor, saying that Imperial Preceptor was walking the path of the devil and wanted to eradicate all the sects in the world. My master was originally unwilling to do it, but it was hard for him to turn down a friend's request, therefore he had brought me out to take a look around. The sects in this world have already been nearly eradicated by Imperial Preceptor, and his actions are indeed no different from the devil. Hu Linga was bewildered, aren't we the righteous side? I feel Imperial Preceptor's actions are very righteous. Wang Muren shook his head, you are all hawks and hounds of the Imperial Court, the claws and teeth of Imperial Preceptor, having a very bad reputation. Qin Mu was puzzled. He felt Imperial Preceptor's action was still okay and righteous. Furthermore, Imperial Preceptor also had an air of righteousness, and everything he did seemed normal and righteous to Qin Mu. How did it turn into the path of the devil in other people's eyes? Furthermore, how did they, the Imperial scholars, become the hawks and hounds of the Imperial Court, the claws and teeth of Imperial Preceptor, having a bad reputation? Righteous and evil, it's maybe just a matter of how you see it. Qin Mu thought to himself. Hu Linga asked, Muren, if your master dies, what would you do? Wang Muren was brimming with confidence while shaking his head, no one can kill my master, his abilities. At this moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked over and said to Wang Muren, go and retrieve your master's body. Before he died, he had told me he had passed down all his abilities to you. This is very good, cultivate well. Wang Muren was stunned and he suddenly jumped off the buck's back to sprint towards the waterfall. A moment later, his whales traveled over. Lit Jade capital is pretty remarkable. I've heard of this sect that has some connections with the heavens above. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, Li City is right ahead. I'm injured so you will have to grab some herbs to treat me. Qin Mu nodded his head. Imperial Preceptor's injury is difficult to treat. The medicine I prescribe would definitely be very complicated. This video will end here.